Guys, today's video we are going to assemble the AutoWorld pit kit and see if it performs better or worse than a 4-gear roller. So you can get these pretty relatively inexpensive. I think they're around 20 bucks or so. Might be able to find them at Hobby Lobby for less, but this one is the van. So we'll call this the Chester build. Okay, so first thing, there's really no easy way to open these freaking things. So we're just gonna do a little slicey around it here. And honestly, I have zero attachment to clamshell packaging. So I know some guys will open it up in a way that, I mean, this is actually pretty nice of me to open it this way because I usually just rip into it and devour it. But it just goes right in the freaking trash. So, but this thing, if we can get it out here, okay. So basically, this is a great setup for someone that wants to build a slot car, but they don't want to get too deep into it where you need a lot of tools. I mean, for this thing here, basically I'm just going to use a Phillips screwdriver, probably use tweezers, and maybe a couple of other things, but super easy. You know, first we can pull the car out. So 4-gear chassis has the magnets installed already so that you don't have to worry about the orientation, which the orientation of the magnet, if they're installed backwards, the car will run in reverse because of the polarity of the magnets. But yeah, so they already come pre-installed. One thing I'm looking at here, which we may get some screwdrivers out here. We may do some improvements on this just as we're putting it together. But if you look at this rear magnet, you can see how it is below flush. And then you see this front magnet, it's above, at least on this side, it's above the plane of the chassis. This side is down. If we flip this over, you can see right here, this side, there is a little bit sticking out. There's nothing over there. So that thing got installed incorrectly, and I believe that these things are glued in there. So we're gonna try, let's see, yeah, we might use our custom little brass hammer, and I'm not sure, we're gonna have to put something across the front of that thing to keep it from, let me just try it on here real quick and see if we can do this. But I'm gonna try to knock it loose just really gently, just because, okay, yeah, so it comes out pretty easy. Probably don't even need to use a hammer, but now it's sitting up and I've pushed it back down and it looks like it's pretty level on both sides. So now if you wanted to, and I don't know, you know, rules wise, if you're racing per rules, you might not be able to glue those in, but now they're flat. Something else that I like to look at is if you look at these two, basically this is what contacts the brush and the spring. You can see how this front one is coming out of the chassis and this one is totally bent in there. You definitely want these to be as equal as possible. So this one I probably will push out from the bottom. Okay, so now you can see they're both sticking up. I'm just going to gently push that one back down in there, make sure it's not hung up on anything. And then this one I will kind of push down, and I'm just eyeballing, you know, how far down in there both of those are. You can see the back one is still lower. So we're gonna have to bend this front one a little bit more. That looks pretty close. So we'll probably start right there. Like I said, you don't have to do those things. You could just put it together and run it. It would run, but just the hobbyist in me, like, I know how important consistency is, and that stuff definitely needs to be more consistent. But the rear axle is installed already, so you can see things just flopping around in there, doing AutoWorld things. You can see this side has a lot more clearance than this side does. We're not really going to do anything about that, but we are going to drop some oil in there, just because once we put the top plate on, this will not be exposed anymore, and some of that side play is going to go away once we put the top plate on, because it's not going to be able to move toward the passenger side. But we're going to oil the front up also. And something that you could do, I know putting the tires on, super easy task, but because there's no guide pin in this thing, we can actually kind of test something else out here real quick. So tires, we're going to install, let's see, I actually put those ones on. So there's a little bit of a ridge on the backside of the tire. So make sure that you put that to the inside. You can see how wobbly that stuff is. You can also roll it here, so I can feel, I kind of feel everything doing that. But that is actually what I'm going to talk about once we get these front tires on here. This is something that a lot of people, they don't do this. So you can take your guide pin out and your electrical out, and you can just roll this thing and see how good it rolls. You can actually, if you have like a Hot Wheel downhill, you can test this against something else and just see how well it rolls if you put different tires on there. Sticky tires, I like to run it like this edge is a straight edge on my mat here, and I like to run it and see if I push it back and forth when I get it as square as I can, how well that car tracks. Because if you have mismatched tires, if something is really bent, it'll want to wander around. But that's something that you can definitely do. Doesn't cost any money to do that, and you can actually learn stuff from that. So next up, we have the top plate with the armature installed, and it has the rear cluster gear installed, which that thing is always pretty wobbly, but we're going to go ahead, put some oil in here, and we're going to try to get some oil up in here. So these do have grease on them already, but I'm going to oil it. So I like to get oil right between the gear and the chassis, and you just got to make sure that it gets in there. And then this one, another one, is I like to get a little bit of oil right on top of the bushing on the armature. And really, once it's assembled, you kind of can't access that, but that will make a big difference. I also will just put just a small amount on here before I assemble it. And that is, I mean, you could actually, if you didn't want to put it there, you could put some right around here. You just want to make sure that that is oiled up. So basically, this is the only part that I would say, if you're a noob, you just want to be careful and make sure that you do it correctly. You do have two different types of springs in here. Okay, they're not marked, but when you set them out, you can see that one is taller than the other. Okay, so the long spring you want to save for your pickup shoes, and the short spring is what you want to install in your spring cups on the chassis. Okay, so you want to drop those in there. Next up, you have your motor brushes, which you have a flat side and then you have a dimple side. Something we are going to do on these, because there is flashing around that outside edge, is we are going to take another invoice. We're going to lay them face down, okay? And we're just going to run this around, okay, until it gets flat. So that totally got flat. Another thing that I like to do is I like to put it on edge where you can roll it, and I'm going to roll this as well. And this is just knocking off any burrs, which you can definitely feel it. You can feel it change as you are rolling it on there. Don't do it a ton. Don't put it on sandpaper. Don't do any of that stuff. I mean, this is just basic stuff. I'm sure that there's like crazy stuff that guys do that race, you know, in the fray and all that stuff. And honestly, I'm curious to know what that stuff is, like if there is a better method or something else that does work, like if you're hitting these on 2000 sandpaper, if you're soaking them in calm drops, like let me know what you guys are doing, because I think it'd be cool to learn that stuff. And if you don't mind us sharing, we will test it and then we will share our results. So if you like to keep stuff to yourself and keep the hobby small, then don't share it. But if you like to, you know, have more people to have fun with, let us know. So these tweezers are metal, so when I go to install these, I can feel it, you know, it's pulling it to the magnets, which if you have a set of non-magnetic tweezers or something else, I mean, you could just drop them in there and kind of fish it around. I just like to use the tweezers. But next up, we're going to go ahead and drop this in there, and it hooks into the front up here. And then you just want to very gently kind of guide this down in there. And if it's not dropping down, like right now, it's not dropping down in there, and that's most likely because one of the brushes popped out. So as you can see, one of the brushes did pop out. You do want to make sure that you don't try to just slam it down on there. You'll break it. It'll be over. You'll be mad at me. But you just want to kind of just gently work this thing down in there until it dropped in there, but it kicked the brush out that time. So things giving us some troubles here. But you know, there's not really anything you can do to prevent this from happening because of the design of this setup. So we're gonna keep trying, and we're gonna just very gently, because you have to hook it underneath the front, you kind of just have to work it down in there. So I can feel that it's hitting something right now. And we're just gonna try to keep working it in there without it knocking stuff out of the way. I mean, I can tell that it's still not happy. So we're just kind of sliding the front around, and it still feels like that back brush is popping out. So I think what's happening is the arm shaft is hitting it and it's kicking it around. So we're going to try to center this up as good as we can here. So the magnets are pulling things around a little bit too, but we're going to try to center it all up as close as possible. All right, and that time I think we got it down in there. Yep, so we are in business that time. So still not totally flat in the back, which to me is, I don't even know what the heck's hitting. I mean, I can smash it down. Looks like it's just bent or just not the highest quality, you know. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and install the screw. I'm not going to put any of the gears on there yet. And that's just because after we put the electrical or the pickup shoes on, I want to run it without having the drivetrain hooked up. So this screw, you want to go ahead and tighten it down. As you can see with that on there, this does not spin nearly as well as it did before. So I'm going to back it off just a little bit, and it still spins horrible, and a lot of that is just because of the relationship with the cluster gear. It is fairly smooth, but it's still not, it's just not ideal. So the motor, one thing you do want to check too is make sure that this can move up and down. You can see that. So that means that the springs and all that stuff are all doing their job. I really don't like how hard that is to spin. That would be, you know, if we were trying to build this thing to be the fastest version of itself, you would want to spend a lot of time getting this to work as free as possible. I mean, because every gear that we add to it, it's going to just compound that. So Next up, we are going to, we'll just pop the guide flag into it. So it comes with a full, not necessarily a guide pin, but this is what we would consider a guide flag. I'm gonna grab my pliers real quick. And I like to grab these things with a set of smooth pliers, and you just kind of pop it in there like so, and then twist it sideways so that, you know, work it kind of back and forth so that it is somewhat free. I personally don't like this flag setup. I like a guide pin, but if you just bought this kit, that's what you got to use. So pickup shoes are coming out, and the longer springs, which are going to be our pickup springs. Hopefully I don't make any of these things go flying, but they definitely can be a booger. But I like to set it in there and hook the back. Okay, and then I just gently walk it forward. You can see how the spring kind of rolled up, and I just keep pressure on it, and now that's in there. Okay, so we'll repeat that. Hopefully this side goes as smooth as that side did. So far it's not, but it's okay. A lot of times too, you know, when stuff's moving around on you and you're trying to click stuff into place and whatnot, like stuff is always moving around. Like right now, this shoe is not wanting to drop into this the hanger or the spring plate very well. So this is one of those times where we need to get the spring out of the way, off to the side, and we're gonna just make sure that this stuff goes on there. So it is kind of, it's definitely taken a lot more pressure than what I would like to see to get it on there. And that's just because this stuff's not, it's not the highest quality, you know, and I know that that's not a surprise to many, but there's a couple things you can do. You can make sure that all of that electrical stuff is flat. Okay, you know, if this bar, this cutout here was bent, it could take a little bit, but this is more of, appears to be more of a pickup shoe problem than it is actually the hanger. So the back of this shoe has some extra meat on it. I'm gonna go ahead and knock that down. You could use a file, you know, if this isn't your first slot car you put together, you can absolutely use a different pickup shoe. That would probably solve the problem pretty easily, but now that's in there, that goes in nice and neat. I mean, honestly, on these things, like, we've done these videos before for 4Gears where we install different pickup shoes and springs, and the performance increases quite a bit. So now both shoes are on there. You do want to look at how close to the edge the pickup shoe is on the tab. You can see how this side is held on a little bit further. To change that, you just basically grab the shoe and bend the top back just a smidge. Try to get them a little bit more even. At this point, the car is ready to run. You can run it on a battery. We're gonna put it up here on our test stand. So just the motor is running right now. And it sounds okay. It sounds just kind of like what I would expect. Sounds like a helicopter, or a pancake. But we're gonna go ahead and oil the bottom of this thing real fast, just because I know we put some oil in on the top and we put a little bit on the top plate and on that bushing, but it sounds about as I was expect. So next up, we have these two gears, which are idler gears. They basically just transfer the power. They really can only go in one way, or at least this big gear, it will only fit in the front. And it does have two sides, so it has a side with a recess and it has a flat side. So this flat side goes up, recess side goes down, and that's going to be the same on the rear idler gear too. So this one, it has a flat side and it has a recess side. So before we install those, I always like to put oil around the base, just because it's not really going to be easy to get in there. And then I'll put a little bit on the teeth of the cluster gear. So that gear is in place and you want to make sure it feels smooth. And then once we put this gear in, we have now connected everything. So now everything is driving and we need to put our clip on. So this clip, I always try to treat these things as gentle as possible, and I hook one side and then the other side I like to use my tweezers. Let's see if I can do this on camera from this angle. I like to get down here on the bottom and just pull it just barely as far out as it needs to go before it clips into place. Okay, and you'll hear it clip into place, but it does, you know, it does just sit across there and keeps that gear in place. But that's essentially everything. You really don't need to oil the top of the gear because it's not in contact with that. You don't want that to be in contact. It's sitting on the center there. So now this thing's ready for full power. Wheels are turning, all of that stuff. While that thing runs for a second, let's look at what's left in here. So we have the front grille. Looks like the rear bumper. Okay, which these just pop in place. You can super glue them. The way that the factory does them is they pop them in place and then they actually melt the backside, but I don't really recommend doing that on these. The front clip goes up in there. You can obviously paint it however, and you could just put a dab of super glue there, but for this video it's not really a point to doing that. But the car's running. Let's throw the body on it. Okay, let's see what we got. Let me grab a block out of here. So obviously it doesn't have the front clip on it. You could customize it, you could paint it. If you wanted to paint it and you wanted to get the glass out, all you got to do is kind of cut back these melted areas where they have melted this in here. And once that's cut back, that whole setup will come out of there. You can paint it however you want, reinstall it. I would just use maybe a little bit of glue, or you could put a little bit of double-sided tape on there. But let's head up to the track up front and we'll just drive this thing around and see how it goes. Hey guys, we're out here on the test track. We're on 12 volts right now, so not super high voltage, but it is enough to run the car on. Kind of wobbling around a little bit just because of the tires. We're using a 35 ohm controller, but it definitely does have some pep. And you know, I'm driving it obviously pretty hard. It is running through the sweeper full throttle, but if I run this corner full blast, it's gonna come off, which I will show you right now. Whoa, it didn't. It's full throttle. Man. So this thing is stuck, which is kind of lame, but obviously you can run them on more power. But in this mode, with these magnets and these tires, I mean, it's stuck down. You can see pickup shoe wear actually isn't that bad. We haven't touched any of that. You know, it's a little bit healing, but yeah, I'm actually really surprised that that thing is just full throttle. And we can't turn the power up because we only have 12 volts on this track. So a lot of guys, oh, it's spun out. So we finally whipped it off there, but it runs okay. compared to, you know, something that's made to go fast. It's still, you know, but it's not an apples to apples comparison. So car ran pretty good. It's a great kit. It's for the money, and if you want to put a slot car together, see how it works. If you want to buy one and kind of build it along in this video, that's great too for the guys that are wanting to kind of get their feet wet in the builds. I did say we're going to compare it to a factory build. So this is a factory built car here. It's just a roller. You know, I mean, it obviously it all looks the same. Spring plates actually look a little bit better. They're a little bit more even than ours was out of the package. But and these are greased up, so I don't know if you guys can hear that chirping, but that chirping means that there's contact somewhere that is not supposed to happen. So we're gonna go ahead and just get some oil in this thing, because I hate that sound. That sound makes me want to cry. And I've heard it before on some very expensive race cars. So the one thing we can't really oil without taking it apart is the rear axle hole. We're gonna have to just run it. But let's pop this body off of here so that we are doing a proper comparison. If I can put the body on. Okay, that's on there. Let's head up to the track and see what we got. All right, guys, we're at the track. We have the Auto World factory built car under the same body. We're gonna just kind of give it some runs. So it feels about the same. Ooh, but it did come off. So I don't know, that could be tires, that could be a lot of different things. But it came off relatively easy. Really easy. So it doesn't really feel that much faster. It just feels like a lot harder to drive. So it could just be different compound of tire. Yeah, I don't know. But it's definitely a lot harder to drive. And I mean, it won't take those corners at full throttle. So we'll have to me, I think the one that we assembled is easier to drive. Even if it is a little bit slower, definitely easier to drive, but there's a lot of variables at play here. So, all right, guys, back at the workbench. So we did our test of both cars. The factory built car ran fine. It definitely felt like it has a different compound of tire, which means, you know, who knows what they're using or what factory it was done in. I do know that the one that we built, it was more pleasurable to drive. You know, it didn't come off the track as easy, even with this big old heavy body. So I think you can't go wrong either way. If you want to get a paintable body and a kit that you can assemble, just sit down and do a project. I mean, like I said earlier, it's something that you want to build along with us in this video. It's a great kit. You can't beat it for the money. Or for the parts, any of that stuff. So we had a lot of fun doing this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If we missed anything, or if there's anything you have questions on or you'd like to see us do with the 4Gear pit kit, let us know. We'll try to get to it in another video. We'll see you.